Readers Entertainment Radio presents Booklights with your host, author Lisa Kessler. Booklights, where we're shining a light on good books.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Booklights today. We are headed into spring later this week, which is super exciting. I hope things are warming up everywhere where you are. And if they're not, I have some steamy romances that you can dive into. Today, we have on USA Today bestselling author Sonali Dev, and she writes Bollywood-style love stories that let her explore issues faced by women around the world while still indulging her faith in happily ever after. Sonali's novels have been on Library Journal, NPR, Washington Post, and Kirkus Best Book of the Year lists. Woohoo! She has also won the American Library Association's Award for Best Romance, the RT Reviewer's Choice Award for Best Contemporary Romance, the RT Seal of Excellence, I miss RT, and was a RITA Finalist. Sonali lives in the Chicago suburbs with her very patient, often amused husband and two teens who demand both patience and humor, and the world's most perfect dog. My puppy assistant would beg to differ. And you can find out more at her website. There is a link to her website right there in the show notes. Feel free to check it out. She has so much great content over there. You can click the link anytime, sign up for her newsletter, and without any further delay, are you there?
I am right here, and thanks so much for having me, Lisa. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. I have loved your books for so long, and it's so exciting to finally get you on the podcast. And you have a new book, How Simi Got Her Groom Back. You want to tell everybody why they should go grab a copy?
Oh my gosh, this is as good a time as any to grab a book like How Simi Got Her Groom Back. The title, of course, is a nod and acknowledgement to how Stella got her groove back, which is a brilliant, brilliant story. And very different from Simi, but it was it's just so the title is just a kind of a nod to Terry and a kind of clever play on her title. But How Simi Got Her Groom Back is basically a sister story. It's a story of two sisters who grew up in India in pretty traumatic, heinous circumstances, not a great childhood. The older one who's Rupi, pretty much had to parent the younger one. So she's had no childhood at all. But she gets her younger sister out, puts her through nursing school, which is kind of a ticket to get her out of their out of their circumstances. And Simi is in America now. She's working as a nurse. The book is set in small town Tennessee, which is, I think, for a book that's set in a South Asian community, a very interesting
a little fish out of water story, right?
Yes. So Simi's there. Everything's going well for Simi. She's very much in love with this guy, secretly for reasons. And then Rupi kind of, gets the quote unquote opportunity to come to America, which essentially ends up being her trafficked into the country. And so she's able to escape that, shows up at Simi's doorstep, in trouble as always, dragging trouble in her wake, so to speak. And then the only way they can find to keep her from having to leave the country, from being deported, and going back to a very unsafe situation, is by Rupi getting into a green card marriage with the love of Simi's life. So and so from then on, the story ensues. So it's kind of, there are shenanigans, but it really is the story of, what makes someone leave their home, kind of moving away from the dehumanizing conversation around, again, quote unquote, legal and illegal humans.
Right.
And kind of, getting inside the story of what it could look like to be in those shoes.
Right. And when you wrote this book, I know because publishing takes so long. But when you wrote this book, you couldn't have known
Yeah.
this
Oh,
nice stuff was going to be going on everywhere. As you're watching it unfold, it sounds like maybe if people read your book, they might get the other side of the story, right?
yes, absolutely. And I think, when I wrote the book, I thought things were bad.
Right. You had no idea.
Yeah. And I feel like in so many things in today's world, you think something is as bad as it can possibly get, and then lo and behold, here comes more, here comes worse. And so that kind of is what happened with this book. I myself am an immigrant. I moved here. I've lived, more of my life here than in India, where I was born. I moved here over 30 years ago now, and so that's a very integral part of my identity,
Right.
being an immigrant and immigrant life, and everything that goes with it. However, that whole thing has gotten, as is the story of not all Americans, because we have some pretty dark history in that regard also. But
Right.
but a large majority of Americans kind of would be proud of, their kind of pathfinding, adventuresome ancestors who left their home and came here. And it takes a certain kind of personality to be an immigrant, I think. It takes a certain kind of hopeful, adventurous soul across
Yeah.
the, and so much of this country is is comes from that stock, so to speak. And now we've become very we've become very picky, or um in assigning that kind of uh, or praise, because what was very desirable in their own ancestors is apparently undesirable in people who are actually running from
Right.
circumstances, running toward opportunity, all of that, right? And
Hmm.
then the words legal and illegal get thrown around very conveniently, in my opinion. And so all of these things are kind of what were at the back of my mind when I wrote this. And then the whole issue became was set on fire, turned into an inferno, and got thrown
Yes.
in our faces.
Crash
So
fire. Yeah.
yeah, so somebody asked me in another interview, would you have written, like, would you have written this book any differently, or would you have written it if it were just about a year or 6 months later? And that's a very difficult question to answer. These are issues 100% I would still want to, and I feel like in some ways um this is a good time for people to walk in the shoes of somebody
Yeah.
who who has an experience that not very many people want to have, but that might humanize the stories behind these statistics that get thrown around. So it is so I'm glad to have from that perspective. But I don't know, like, would I have changed anything as I was writing it? I certainly would have the stakes would have been kind of even higher, and I
Yeah.
don't know
Oh my
if they would be.
gosh.
But yes, so it is it's a hard question. Could have, would have, what would have happened is always, on one hand, that's the answer we're looking for in fiction. But yes, the truth is, I wrote this story. We write a good year before we
Right.
finish, a good year
Yeah.
before it comes out. And so that's when this book was written, when it was still, when this issue is still, it's been important always, I think,
Right.
in the country. And and now it just
Got a
is
spotlight. So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well, I really feel like strongly that books are a magical way for people to slide into the skin of somebody else and be the main character and experience the world through somebody else's eyes. So I feel like even though, your book is obviously it sounds like there's shenanigans. I think that that is really a perfect way for people to experience an issue from a different point of view in a safe space, and hopefully maybe get a more um accept it, just to understand that people aren't good or bad, or, that there's a different viewpoint, and maybe, soften some hearts toward why people might make the choices that they do, right?
Yeah, I'm always trying, to exercise my own empathy muscle because we all have blind spots, we all have
Hmm.
comfort zones, all of that. But I do feel we all have a responsibility to step out of those, to kind of,
Right.
constantly see the world from, if we just live and die and see the world from, the perspective that's been conditioned into us, then what have we even lived, right?
Right.
It's every single time you see the world from, from fresh eyes, from new eyes, you become uncomfortable with something. You reach into your own ideas, and so many of our ideas now are so highly influenced by,
Mhm.
constant bombardment of somebody else's ideas into our
Right.
space because we're constantly consuming someone else's ideas. And so it becomes, and most of those ideas are either trying to get you to buy something or trying to get you to be part of something, right? Us and them, us and them. And that division is constantly what's being thrust upon us.
Hmm.
And I mean, there was a time when the world was naturally like that. It was, homogeneous bubbles. And
Right.
but a person who chose to step out of it. But now it's like everything is everywhere, but you're constantly being like sheep herded into boxes of thought. And so I do think, reading is the say, like you said, the safest way to, leave your comfort zone, to
Right.
exercise your muscle of empathy. It is a muscle, absolutely. And and kind of live a day or two or a lifetime in a book, in someone else's shoes. And in this particular case, I think dehumanization is, in the conversation around immigration. I think the fact that, anytime one set of people is able to convince themselves that another set of people is somehow lesser or lower, and
Right.
therefore, the only answer can be charity. If you're trying to be good, again, I use good and easy flexibly, and or violence and persecution. And I feel like that can only be done if you convince people that this other set of individuals take away their humanity, right? Like they're a
Right.
lesser human. So dehumanizing someone is the only way. And I think the campaign of dehumanizing people around this conversation has been heartbreakingly successful. And I think that we are, on the other hand, the humanizing them has to be the answer. This is what my heart says is, humanizing. So the more you the more of those stories that you can tell, the more of personhood that can
Right.
that you can access. That's really important. And having
And
said that, I think bitter pills and sugar coating is part of the genre I write, and what I choose to do with it. And so I think that subversion is one of my favorite tools. And so I think if you can have people, lecturing people seldom works, and just giving them an experience and letting them kind of live their lives. So escape, joy, and also we're all working toward joy. And so
yeah.
it has to be part of the storytelling. And so there are shenanigans, and there is, parts where your heart will sing, which is part of that journey. But there's also parts where your heart will break.
Right. Well, and I think that, I mean, I'm obviously biased because I love romance, but I think that love humanizes more than anything else, because every
100%.
human being, every race, every country, they all love their kids, they all love their spouse, and so I feel like romance does a really good job, because you can get in somebody else's shoes, maybe a different culture's shoes, but they still love just like you do. And I think that romance does that really well to, really help people walk in somebody else's shoes and realize, hey, we're more alike than we are different, right?
Yeah, we are absolutely alike. I mean, the idea, I mean, my definitive belief is oneness.
Mm-hmm.
with everything and everyone. And I think that that's the thing that forces who benefit from these sort of things, that's the one thing they have to convince us against. And so as artists, what one of the things we can do is do that. And you're absolutely right. Our hearts break the same way, our hearts connect the same
Right.
way across every boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And romance deals in relationships, and romance deals in hope, but more than anything else, romances are personal growth journeys, correct? So
Mm-hmm.
it's becoming the person you were born to be, who then is in a place where they can let love into their life, correct? And
Right.
that is the universal journey. Every human being is born to be their best self, right? To come into
Mm-hmm.
themselves. And I think that is the essential journey of the romance novel, is to come into yourself. You start out in some ways broken, as which is also a very human experience, and you find a way to heal yourself.
Right, right. Yeah, I love that. Well, when you were writing this book, obviously all the ice thing wasn't happening, but what was your inspiration? How did you watch how Stella got her group back and go, "Hey, I have an idea," or how, where'd the idea come from?
I mean, how Stella got her groove back is, is inspirational for all my writing, right? It's women connecting with women. It again is the essential story of coming into yourself, of accepting your own power, accepting your own right to joy, and doing it by connecting with other human beings. And in this particular case, the relationship of women with women, which has, I think, in some ways, been been one of the greatest forces of change in the past century. But so obviously, the every all work is influenced by the women I've read growing up. But there is actually a story of where how Simi got her groom back happened. And it basically came from a story where a friend, we were all kind of, it's one of those nights with friends when people are telling stories. And this friend had a friend of his who went back to, I think it was Bangladesh or somewhere, with her boyfriend. And when she got there, they had gone for a family wedding or something. The boyfriend's family kind of said to her, "Well, you're a citizen, and our your boyfriend is, or your partner is already kind of has a green card, or is already lives there. So
Right.
why don't you marry his brother?" So that he can, so that he gets out of here. And there was obviously reasons why they wanted to kind of wanted that for him. And they actually, like, this proposal was proposed to her. And when I heard the story, I was like, oh, that's super preposterous, but also and of course, that was kind of that. And then that started running in my head, like, how far will we go for love? Because for that
Right.
boy, it's his brother or whatever. Like, so that was what got some of the wheels turning, right, behind why people do put themselves in this situation of danger, right? There's
Right.
also all of the reasons why. I mean, nobody, it is, as somebody who nobody leaves their home uh, when there's a welcome mat, as some of us had the privilege of having. That's a different thing. But when you come here in conditions of refuge, nobody is doing that by
Right.
choice. That is
Mhm.
my absolute belief, is that that is not, nobody comes somewhere where they're made so actively feel unwelcome,
Right.
dehumanized, and the so what you're running from is worse than what you're running into.
Right.
And what does that tell us after what we've
Right.
right? And so there is, and I would so I kind of, that's where my brain was going with that's kind of where then this story started to come about. And I'm always, as I said, personal journeys of how family, community, sisterhood, changes, allows you to heal, allows you to make a bad situation good.
Right.
But you have to get to a place where you can allow that for yourself. Because in the end, it's like, what do I deserve is such a question. Even people with privilege ask. So when people are constantly being bombarded
Right.
with, you're lesser, you're lesser, you're lesser, you don't deserve this, you don't deserve that. How do we own, our own abundance?
Right.
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 So
That we're worthy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Well, when you were writing the book, when you finished it and you were going through edits, did you have a scene that was like your favorite where you went, "Oh, the whole book was worth it for this scene"?
Yes. So I'll say the scene that, so this was a difficult book for me to write, like, because in some ways, I'm such a rule follower, right? You're supposed to this, supposed to that, as I think often we are. So for me to my own journey around that legal illegal thing,
Right.
Was a thing that I had to give a lot of thought to, had to, kind of really get inside, because it had to be authentic, right? It couldn't
Right.
just be like, so Ruby, I had to be in some ways, right? Like in that way, it had to be fully for me um, a real choice.
Right.
And so so of course the scene in which that happens was a hard scene to write, because the book hinges on that. If you
Right.
don't buy that, then you don't buy anything in the book. And then that just for that particular reader, I have failed as a storyteller. But so that was an important and difficult scene. But I think for me, again, being a romance writer, I feel like those are always the banter, the prickly person allowing a little kind of a little thread of their inner softness show through, and all of that is always fun. So that
Hmm.
was fun for me. But I think the scenes that I really had fun with is where this family literally, heals these girls. So it is so whether it's the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law scene, where they go shopping for her wedding clothes and she is, treated terribly, and how the mother-in-law reacts and how that causes them to bond in a very particular way. I think those things, when we kind of sneak past each other's barriers and sneak past each other's shields, that is in life and in stories one of my favorite things about being alive. And so that scene was wonderful for me to write. All of the family scenes where they just, and we hear so much about families not having boundaries as a negative thing, and in many ways it is. And I have, there are books that I have written that are entirely based off of that. But also, anything that is so filled with love, uh, you know, and conscious of the other person's pain. That is the difference between, boundaries, how you cross boundaries. So this is a family that has no boundaries, but this is also a family that is very invested in the other person's happiness, right? And so for girls who've never had that, to show up in a family like this, and then to allow themselves to, feel that and feel worthy and heal, those scenes were my favorite to write, I
I
think.
love that. Will there be another book for the sister?
No,
Okay.
not that I have anything planned right now. I feel like it's pretty clear. It's not, I feel like it's, to me, what's going to happen of their lives feels very clear. I realize I have heard from a lot of readers where they're like, we want more of this. And, I mean, maybe a novella or something sometime just for fun. But I think the story itself, the thing that I was looking to answer, and the journey that I was looking to take did reach its,
Right.
for me, satisfying conclusion.
Yes. Romance readers are such big series fans. We can't help ourselves.
Yeah,
We want
I
every
know.
single person to get a happy ever after.
I know. And they do both. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Spoiler alert, but
Yeah.
yes, they do. They do. In my opinion, they do. Uh, you know, um, yeah, I mean, we would have to have given them more siblings to tell their stories, but these siblings got their stories, I think.
Well, speaking of, you have a series that is Jane Austen inspired. Do you want to tell because everyone loves Jane Austen, but do you want to tell everybody about that series and
The
they can
Rajes,
go
yes.
grab those if they want series of family.
Yes. Yes, and incredibly, and that's exactly that. It's a family of so I always I blame Jane Austen for the person I became, for having, from having read her young. And we could talk another hour about why, but when I was growing up and reading her and being so influenced by, what I learned from those books, I kind of always knew. So in my head, I was already retelling those stories, right? With my, cultural translations,
Right. Hmm.
with the aunties and, my world and the cute boys and all of that. So that had already happened. Plus, I think that cultural translations of it have been, done so well and often, that's not like, by the time my writing became a serious thing for me, I knew that was not, I knew I was going to do something with it, but I knew that it wasn't going to be translating her story into something. So these books are more my homages, my nods to what I learned from those stories, and what they personally, how they changed me, Sonali, and made me who I am today. So there are more nods to that, what I learned from those books. But they are set, and I always thought my four favorites, I wanted to, have them under one story umbrella. So this is a politically ambitious Indian American family that's descended from royalty, and one of the reasons for doing that, actually, there's two reasons for doing that. One is, like, so many of these books are kind of in a little bit of an exploration of privilege in our world today.
Right.
As I think as I think, Jane Austen's work also was, because she
Right.
dealt in that without, in this very natural sort of way. And so for, so a family with this much privilege is kind of a vehicle to kind of explore what that gives you as you navigate the world, correct?
Right.
And so that was one of the reasons. The other reason is, as an immigrant, I feel like, there are rungs of making your new home your home, and political power, or getting to a place where you're going to make decisions, about your new home. That's or become part of that process of making decisions. That's kind of one of the, that's once you get there, then your home is really a home. You're not just
Right.
being there. You're trying to make choices on behalf of. And so those were the reasons that this family is who it is. But their oldest son is running for California governor, and the four stories go through when the gubernatorial candidacy is announced to after the election. And each one of them is a spin on, one of my favorite Jane Austen novels. The first one is Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors, which is a gender swapped Pride and Prejudice, where she is the Mr. Darcy and he is the Lizzie Bennet. The second is Recipe for Persuasion, and that almost is kind of, an exploration into the prejudice of your family, convincing you that something, that you chose for yourself is not what is great for you. And I do it from both perspectives. I do it from the perspective of a mother who says, no, I get to make my own decision, and whatever consequences will be, will be. And then the consequence is the collateral damage is the daughter, and it's her story too, who then, like Anne, um, Elliot finds her spine, finds a way to
Mhm.
grow the spine to reach for what is. So to me, persuasion is about mistakes not being absolute, right? You can make a mistake when when you're young, and then when you change and you grow grow what it takes, you will have a second chance. So it really is essentially about mistakes not being absolute. In Sense and Sensibility is Sense and Sensibility. And in today's day, we don't really have the relationships and taboos and public shame doesn't work the same way. So it's a little bit of the of a play, on that. And then the Emma project, which is Emma, to me, I think the whole matchmaker angle of Emma is one thing, but really to me, Emma is a person who has everything, believing that they are in a better position to make choices for those who don't. So it's essentially a haves and have not story to me, right? And in today's world, we live, in a world where what 0.01% of the world's population owns what 70% of the wealth or something
Yes.
ridiculous like
Yeah.
that. And how do we deal with that? By this thing we call charity, right? So
Right.
the charity of the billionaires, and that's a very complicated thing. And
Right.
I think so. The Emma Project is these two rich kids who are trying to make the world a better place. Through social, through being social activists and through and what does that actually mean? What are the choices it gives them? It's also gender flipped, and it is a so and it's she is substantially older than he is, and it kind of talks about what do-gooders are doing and what does that mean.
Right.
So that's
That
those
makes
are my
me think
four.
of that show. If you have Apple, it's called Loot, and Maya Rudolph is on it, and she is divorced from this tech billionaire who could be Facebook. Anyway, they get divorced, and she has all these billions of dollars, and she doesn't know what to do with herself because she's been his wife for 20 years, and she realizes that she has a foundation that she never knew she had. And so the series it's very funny, but she's basically trying to give away billions, but the money keeps making more money and they keep trying to give it
Well,
away. And yeah, it's a
if
great,
that's not a snapshot of the world we live in,
right?
Maya
Yeah.
Rudolph could be reading her grocery lists and I would watch it. But that's a great recommendation. So.
Yeah, it's a fantastic show about our times, but dang. Well, it sounds like you've always been a reader, but I don't know when you immigrated, but did you come here ready to be a writer, or did writing come to you later? What'd your journey look like to getting published?
Oh gosh, no. How much time do you have? I have always written. So as me, I think I wrote even before I could read. Like I was telling stories to my dad at bedtime instead of him telling, me stories. So I always and I we moved a lot around a lot when I was very young, and my I we call them diaries back then, but it was essentially journaling, getting you through everything because I could never like the way I've processed every emotion ever that I couldn't handle is by writing it down. So I was always a writer, and of course it making a living in writing is not a thing that is that any sane person should consider lightly, but
Yeah.
and I didn't. So that journey is so I've always been a writer, but the journey to publishing you know came now. When I look back, it feels like a very natural thing I always wanted to do, but it was a dream that felt too far and all of that. And so when I did decide that this is what I wanted to do, of course, there was almost nothing in print that was contemporary romance, and just very little contemporary romance of with people of color in it. There
Right.
was the Beverly Jenkins and Brenda Jackson, and just like a handful of Indian Americans had tried their hand at it. And it was just really just a thing where people you had to be pretty audacious to think this was good, but a lot of and so you could even just the act of pitching your story to
Right.
New York Publishing was a whole different thing. They were able to say things to you that people would lose their jobs for now. It was a very different world. And so that journey was, but I think once I had decided, then something inside me just believed it, as we all, we have to. And Bollywood Affair came out in 2014. I sold it in 2013. And so yeah, that was a very different time. And there was no, one of the good thing about that is that there was no so many of books where there are, the stories which are, have other stories like it have been there before, have something to, have a mold or have a path. When you're doing
Right.
something that, that everybody anyway thinks is like, what the hell is this? Then the good news is you can do, so I've always been able to write exactly what I want to write,
Oh, that's amazing.
and say exactly what I want to say. And that's just organically then gone from, that to what it is now. But yeah, no, I it was the country I moved to and the country we are in now in terms of what is published, what's seen in media, is and thanks to all the people whose shoulders we stand on.
Right.
There's been a lot of people who worked and worked and worked, did not get, and then you keep on, it one step at a time. But yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, I could chat with you all day, but I will wrap this up. If somebody reads how Simi got her groom back and they're super excited, what's the best way to contact you? Are you on social media, or how do they?
I am on social media. I'm most on Instagram, but I'm also on Facebook. I do have a Facebook group. You can email me at sonalidev@sonalidev.com. All the information is on my website, which is sonalidev.com. And I am, I think, sonali.dev on Instagram. And yes, I absolutely love hearing from readers. Whether you love it, whether you don't, that's but certainly if you love it,
Yeah.
do
I always tell
reach
people,
out.
you never know if a writer's having a bad day and you send 2 lines about how the book changed their life, and whoa, you could be responsible for the next chapter getting written.
I'm telling you, it's oxygen. It's oxygen for
It
us.
is.
It really, truly is. The number of times when I've been feeling like this is too hard, and I have gotten, just like you said, 2 lines from a reader that this touched in some way. Man, it just changes it gives you like this whole boost of fuel for the next. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's just,
Yes.
please keep doing that. Yes.
Yes, for sure. Well, thanks so much for being here today. It was great chatting with you. Everyone, go grab How Simi Got Her Groom Back. It sounds fantastic. And be sure you check out, is it the Rajas series? Am I saying that right?
The Rajes, yes.
Yes. So check those out. And thanks so much for being here today. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you, Lisa, and thanks everyone for listening. This was so much fun.
Thanks for joining us on Booklights. Be sure to connect with us at www.readersentertainment.com for articles, blogs, videos, and podcasts that matter to readers.